Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Show. Sunday still, but looking at Monday's two-game slate here in the NBA with the Pacers and Knicks kicking off their series. Also got the Timberwolves and Nuggets game 2 after a nice win by the Timberwolves there on Saturday. Not as good of a day on Sunday for us as it was Saturday and Friday. A couple nice days in a row, followed by a tough one in that Cavs and Magic game. But the Cavs are moving on after a nice comeback win against that Magic squad. Shout out Paolo Banchero with an incredible performance there in his first ever Game 7. Plenty of more time for that man to get some playoff series wins. But let's jump right into what I have here for Monday. At the end of the video, we'll get into that record here for the season. Starting out in that Nuggets Timberwolves game, let's go back to Naz, baby. Why not go back to Naz Reid? 9.5 points, and I still think he's got a few more minutes that he could play. He played about 22.5 in this last game, took the third most shots still, but I think there might be a few more minutes available for him. I mean, in part, he played some minutes because Cat was in foul trouble, but that's not an anomaly. Cat cannot stay out of foul trouble, man. That's what happened in that Phoenix series, and it happened once more in Game 1 against the Nuggets. So Cat still did work while he was in there, but I can't rely on his minutes, maybe even not as much as I can rely on Naz Reid minutes moving forward, in part because they need that big man three-point shooter out there to stretch the floor. They've been really relying upon having somebody like that in the lineup for them, either Naz or Cat moving forward. And I do think Naz is going to continue to be the hot hand, as he kind of dusted off the cobwebs in that first half. He was really just a little bit more of a malaise for Naz, it seemed like. His shooting was off. He wasn't really even pulling the ball. And then he got that confidence. And obviously that bank three helps a lot, but we don't even really need him to hit that to still get over this 9.5 point prop. So at minus 112, I could see this going up a bit more, as he'll probably be a popular player to bet upon. So we're going to take it 9.5 points here right now. Back to the other dude who dominated the second half for the Timberwolves, and that's Mike Conley. And my thing with both these dudes is, like, they both had really great second halves that might not be something that's super repetitive, but I mean, or repeatable rather. But I mean, the first half was so bad that that's also not something you think of as consistently going to be repeated. So we're going to take the points and assists for Mike Conley here, over 16.5 of them. I like both props. I mean, he had 10 assists in this last game. He also had the 14 points. And I look at him as what I call the adult in the room. Once again, for the young Wolves, he's the dude that's going to be out on the floor no matter what. Ant was under control. I mean, Ant looked incredible. He was incredibly poised. So I don't think he needs necessarily an adult in the room for himself. But I mean, other guys do. I would include Cat in that, and I would include Rudy in that, and a couple other folks like Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, he's just a very good presence to have on the floor, which is why he should be up at about 38 minutes a game again, right? He had 38 in the last game. He's been playing that amount during the playoffs, and I think he'll continue to do that against this Nuggets squad in this series. He scored 10-plus points now in 13 straight games versus Jamal Murray. That's a big storyline that gets left out. Now, Jamal's a little bit hurt. He's listed as questionable right now for Game 2 and still clearly a bit banged up, although I fully expect him to play after that incredible fourth quarter he had. But he's not a great defender. In fact, he's a minus defender when he's on the floor. And that's why we've seen Mike Conley actually be able to have a lot of success, whether he was on the Jazz or he was on this Minnesota team. He actually played really, really well against against Murray and the Nuggets for the past 3 seasons. As far as the assists go and the points, both of those things at a nice steady level for him in the playoffs, the last 5 playoffs games. And really the only bad game he had was Game 1, where nobody on the Timberwolves shot well. I think they had 82 points in Game 1 last year against this Nuggets team in the first round of the playoffs. But now we're talking about the last 5, including this series and the final couple games of last series all of the Phoenix series and a couple of the last games from the Denver series. He's up to about 21 points and assists combined. So I still think he's good to get 17 in this one, especially with the way that he's diming up. And if Ant does get double teamed a lot more, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with Ant, to be honest with you. Even when they brought double teams, that man was just fighting through it. Did get only about 4 assists, I believe, in this last game for Ant, but that's a big reason why you saw the 10 assists for Mike Conley. Ant actually had a bunch of secondary assists where he made the pass to Conley. Conley passed it off to the dude who shot it, and he ended up with the assist. So we're going to combine both the points and assists for Mike in this one to go over 16.5. Another man who had a rough shooting night in both the first and second half, actually, for Jaden McDaniels, did not hit a bucket from the field in this last game, but he did get plenty of rebounds. He got 8 of them, and we're going to take him to get over 4.5 in this one for plus money on MGM, just a half a unit on this one, because I still want to test it out. But my theory here is that this is going to be a consistency for him in terms of getting a lot of boards against this Nuggets squad in this series. If for no other reason, this man's going to be playing 39 to 42 minutes a night every time that Jamal Murray is on the floor, basically. And if Jamal Murray misses a game, maybe JMD's minutes go down a little bit. But if Jamal Murray is in there, and he should be in there for at least 38 if he's healthy at all, then McDaniels is going to mirror his minutes and just get out there to guard him, because he's just been an absolute Jamal Murray killer on defense when he's been guarding him really the last 7 games now. He's kept Jamal from getting his props 7 games in a row. In part, part of that is Jamal going under on the rebounds. McDaniels is a much better rebounder than Jamal. He's just bigger in general, right? And obviously has a little bit more likelihood to get those offensive rebounds, of which he had 3 in this last game. He had 14 rebound chances overall to pull down those 8 boards. Super repeatable for him. That's something that you should consider an outlier by any means for Jalen McDaniels. That's something that he did against this team most of the time as well. He's averaging 5 boards against them this season, 8.3 rebound chances, but that's also in about 31 minutes. Bump him up to 38 to 42, like I'm saying. He's good for the about like 12 rebound chances, what I would say he's going to continue to average, especially if, I mean, Naz Reid's not the rebounder that Cat is, and he's probably going to continue to get more minutes than Cat, as I've already continued to believe. Maybe not more minutes, but about the same amount, which means Jaden McD will be out there as the second rebounder for second best rebounder for this Timberwolves team moving forward. So we're going to take him to get 5 boards at plus money here in this game moving forward. Time to move on to these Knickerbockers, baby, taking on the Pacers. God, I hate the Pacers. This slide here is going to be really important for everything that we're going to talk about with player props in this series moving forward, right? Because this is really about how the Pacers play defense, which is going to tell us a lot about what we can expect from the players on the Knicks and what we've seen from the players on the Knicks against this Pacers defense. So look at the pick and roll ball handler. Everything you see here is how the Pacers match up on defense against this particular play type. As far as pick and roll ball handler stuff goes, give up the most points to that position, to that play type, right? Isolation, if you want to run ISO and you're good at it, they are the second worst team at stopping isolation points. The third worst team at stopping handoff points. Stop me if you see a pattern here, which is they don't double, right? They don't help out at all on their one-on-one defensive matchups, which is odd considering that they usually have about 3 minus defenders on the floor at most times of the game. However, that's what Rick Carlisle has always done. That's what he's going to continue to do. Even did it against the Bucks. Even while Dame was carving him up, he still didn't blitz Dame and throw more dudes at him. So that's why you actually see the point guard assist there at the bottom, as well as spot up shooters, something that the Pacers stop really well. They don't give up assists to point guard, second fewest on the season, and their fewest points per game to spot up shooters. And if you think about why spot up shooters would have success against a particular team, it's because that dude is open, because his man has sagged off of him to either double down on somebody else or just to basically help out right in the lane as guys drive. But they don't. They let guys get into the paint. That's why they give up some of the most points per game in the paint. I believe 4th most on the season in the paint. One of the worst defenses down low. And they don't give stuff up out on the 3-point line because they run you off the line. And even if they run you off the line and you get past them, well, now they're fine with you getting to the rim, or they're going to foul you because they are fouling at a very, 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 very high rate. The 3rd worst free throw attempt rate for their opponent on the season. So all that leads me to my first bet here for the Knicks and Pacers series. And I know it's an under for one of the best players in the playoffs still, and what I consider to be the best New York Knick of all time, Jalen Brunson under 8.5 assists. But we're getting plus 114, and I could not pass that up because I was already going to see what those were so I could go under, to be honest with you. As long as this wasn't anywhere around, 7.5, 6.5, now you're losing me. But 8.5, I'm still good with an under, especially for plus money. If you look at what he did versus Indy this season, 3.7 assists per game on the season in 3 games versus the Pacers, only about 12.5 potential assists, and he was still averaging 38.5 minutes per game in those 3 against the Pacers. So this is basically where he's at in the playoffs, except for he's had a few more potential assists. Last series against the 76ers, he was up at about 15 potential assists per game and averaged 9. Right. So like that's a much, much different team than this one, because they are going to double down on him. They are going to try to force the ball out of his hands, did the Pacers when he ran that pick and roll. They're much better at limiting stuff to the pick and roll ball handler than this Pacers team is. And on the season, he was at about 7 assists per game for JB in 36 minutes. We should be expecting about 42 for him. But everything else I've said about how good this Pacers team is at limiting assists because of how bad they are at giving up points to point guards and guys that are doing what Jalen Brunson's doing every game, that's why we're still good with the under on the assists here, even with the 42 minutes. Look, even if you give him 1 more assist than he averaged in the season, we're still getting under this number. So I really love this bet for JB. We'll see how they play him moving forward. There might come a time soon in the series, even in the maybe second half of this game 1, where they're forced to blitz him and double him a lot more than they normally would have. Using that logic, I have a same game parlay for JB because I do think the Knicks are good for game one here. They're going to come out roaring and they're going to take on their rival in a really big way, I believe, at the Garden. So I'm going to take a same game parlay for JB to get his 25 points. That's super conservative. You could even bump that up to 30 and I'd have no problem with it. I'm going to take the Knicks money line and I'm going to bump up his assist to an alt assist line and take under 10.5 dimes for Brunson in this game. Starting with the points, because we know about the assists here. And I even, like I said, bumped it up to 10.5 just to like give us a little wiggle room here for a same game parlay. 35.7 points per game in those three versus Indy. This is going to be what you see from him. He's going to get shots and he's going to score from the exact parts of the floor that this team is not good at limiting, which is basically everything inside the three-point line. He looked at 25.7 field goal attempts per game, which is an absurd number for 3 games during the regular season. But he shot 26 times a game against his team and had 10 free throw attempts per game as well. Because as I mentioned, this team is dead last in limiting free throw attempts to their opponent. And versus Indy, his stats, they're pretty much equal to what he's done in the playoffs anyway, against a much better defense at limiting what he wanted to do in the last series against Philadelphia. Now we're talking about the same amount of minutes, similar amount of minutes, actually has more in the playoffs, but still played a very high limit total there against the Indy, averaging 38 in the regular season in those 3 games. Plus he had 26 shots. Well, he's at about 29 shots in the playoffs, right? So he's at 10 free throw attempts per game in the playoffs, 10 free throw attempts per game versus Indy during the regular season. My point is like what he's been doing as he stepped up in the playoffs was already kind of what he was doing against Indy in the regular season. So you kind of combine the fact that he's going to play a few more minutes than even the 38 a game that he played against this team. And you combine the fact that he's going to shoot a few more times to somehow get more than 26 field goal attempts and should be getting to that line, to the free throw line, that 10 per game that he's been averaging. This is a really good look for Jalen Brunson. It makes total sense that his points prop at its core is at like 34.5 at this point. Even that doesn't scare me, but I'm going to dumb it down and take it for an SGP to see a little feeler for see how we go with game one. Bear with me while I go under on Josh Hart, and I'll talk about that bet in a second here, but I just want to point out that this was something I was ready to look at since the Philly series, because as awesome as he was in the Philly series, and not just rebounding, but getting those points as well and hitting a ton of shots for this team in the fast break, and most importantly, as a spot-up shooter. That's really what he does. He's not a pull-up shooter. He is only good off the catch and shoot, and as we know, Indy's not good, is very good at limiting spot-ups and catch and shoot stuff. But versus the Philadelphia 76ers this season, he's now played them 10 times. And in those 10 games, he averaged 43 minutes, 40 of them, 40 minutes per game during the regular season, by the way. So he didn't get a gigantic bump in minutes during the playoffs versus Philly. He was still playing that much against them during the regular season. The minutes high, the points per game over what he averaged on the season, which was about 9.5. And even if you look at the last like 30 games of the season where Josh Hart stepped up and just like put his name in the ring for like one of the better players in the East that we weren't quite ready for, especially with his offensive uptick, like he was still at about 12.5 points per game in the second half of this season, where he really had a huge uptick. Like I said, that's 3 more points per game than he averaged on the season, but it's still not as many as he got against this Philly team, which is at 16 a game. The rebounds are the most noticeable thing, right? Like 13 rebounds against game against Philly is how you get boards against Philly. Is Josh Hart, his exact player type, is the dude that comes in while his big man is boxing out Joel Embiid. He comes in and gets those rebounds. That's exactly why guys like Josh Hart and small forwards and all these types of wing players who are athletic and attack the boards, they get a lot of rebounds against Philly. So that's why he had all these, plus the 4.8 assists, because once again, he had the ball in his hands so much and was a little bit more of a playmaker against a Philly team that gives up a few more assists than does this Pacers squad. But let's look at him versus this Pacers squad. 3 games this season, so much smaller sample size, but look at how everything drops. Even though he's at 37.2 minutes, put him at 40. That you still extrapolate those numbers further, and it's not going to get you to his totals for this game. His points per game dropped from, like I said, 16 to 6, essentially. The rebounds from about 13 to 10, and the assists from about 5 to 3. So everything is dropping a lot. And in fact, he's worse against Indy than he is against most teams on the season. These are all below his season averages as well for all of these numbers in 3 games against Indy. I get it, but it's still a matchup based more than anything, especially when you look at that one that I was telling you about here a minute ago, just bringing it back up. This is not anything that he does, right? He's not a point guard getting assists. He's a spot-up shooter. He's not an ISO player. He's not getting dribble handoffs. And he's certainly not the pick-and-roll ball handler. He's the pick man and the roll man way more often than he is the actual ball handler in this play type. So for his bet here, we're going to take Josh Hart under. 33.5 points, rebounds, and assists, but put a full unit on it. And I hate to say it, but this is like my favorite play of the day, to be honest with you. I mean, Indy is just a much better matchup to guard him, and especially on those rebounds, like is what I'm saying here. Like, it's not like Hartenstein or Mitch Rob when they're on the floor, or even OG, are going to be focused on boxing out a guy like Joel Embiid. There is no Joel Embiid. There's Pascal and there's Miles Turner, and that's kind of it, right? And I mean, Nesmith is a good rebounder too, which is another problem for Hart. He's going to have much more difficult matchups than when he was facing Kyle Lowry, Cam Payne, Buddy Hield, even Maxey and Tobias Harris. Those are basically all the dudes that guarded him throughout that series. Nobody in there is as good a defender for him as Aaron Nesmith when he's guarding him, or Andrew Nembhard when he's guarding him. And basically Nembhard and Nesmith are going to switch between guarding Josh Hart and guarding Jalen Brunson. One of those two dudes will always be on those two guys on the Knicks. And that's going to be a way worse matchup for Hart than what he saw in this last series. Like I said, number one limiting spot up shooters. And Hart in the playoffs has upped his spot up shooting. He's taking 7 attempts per game, which is more than OG, more than Dante DiVincenzo even in the playoffs, because he's getting more minutes than those guys, obviously. But even OG, who has turned into a bit more of a pull-up shooter in this, at least in the last series, he was taking his man to the basket, pulling up from mid-range. That ain't Josh Hart's game. And that's really what it takes to get points against this Pacers defense. So we're going to go under in the first one, 33.5 PRA. I would not be the least bit shocked to see this down at about 29 or 30.5 PRA in the coming game. So we're going to get ahead of it and look pretty smart when we go under 34 points and rebounds and assists. Like I said, quick look at the totals here and the record for the show. In the playoffs now, 66 and 55, up 5.5 units. I'm fine with that through the first, like, basically month of not even, right? Like 3 weeks, 2 weeks of the postseason here. If we do that on average every couple of weeks, we get 5 units. We're going to end in a really, really nice spot. So going to keep moving along. The only thing that I need to get better at here is the parlays, to be honest with you. Player props I'm happy with. Sides and totals, we keep moving. And so that's helped us get to about 38.7 units year to date on the season now in the NBA total. So if you're betting $100, you're looking at about $4,000 that we've made, betting pretty nice ROI on your money there. So we'll keep it rolling here in the playoffs. And just a couple more reminders as we head out. The Discord is live, so I would jump in there. The description of this video has the link to the Discord. Getting a lot of good looks in there, a lot of new people jumping in, so I appreciate you guys. Make sure you check everything out. Got the bets channel in there, so you can get that stuff early before I do put out these videos. Make sure you're not having those lines move on you and you can get the same price. So having a really good time in there. Would love to invite you guys in. And then the last thing here we've got is the props.cash promo that I am still running in partnership with them. Love that tool. On the live stream every day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, which I'll be there on Monday once again, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. You guys jump in the comments with a bet, and I go over it using predominantly props.cash, which has been really, really helpful, finding potential assists, rebound chances, all that stuff in one-stop shop kind of fashion here for props.cash. So come in. If you do want to test it out for a month, you can get the first month 25% off using that code LYB24. And that's all the time I have for you guys in this one. So continue to follow along. Really appreciate you subscribing to that page so you don't miss these projection videos. Then 5:30 p.m. Eastern every single day moving forward, we are going to be having that live stream where I'll be helping you guys pick out the best bets that we can find right up until game time. So until I see you next, happy betting.